On the bench today, we've got the Hosim X16 1/12, 1/11 scale brushless RC car, and if this thing turns out to be any good, this could be a great deal for the price. First of all, I think the body looks pretty good. They do have some strange greebling on here, but it's not as bad as I've seen on some other bodies, and they're definitely heading in the right direction. We got some pretty generic looking body pins here, and the body itself appears to be fairly decent quality, reasonably thick. I expect for this size of car, it should hold up pretty well. The really interesting stuff though is underneath this body. Starting from the front, we've got plastic body shocks, got some headlights up here, a plastic shock tower. You can see that it's all Philips hardware, all-in-one ESC receiver, and that's gonna be powering this brushless Outrunner motor. I'm really curious to see if this Outrunner motor can actually power this thing up to the claimed 37 miles an hour, and if it's gonna be able to handle some off-road bashing with dirt and sand getting into it. Comes with 2 batteries, and a pretty strange battery strap situation here. I think this second battery strap is not going to be used. And these batteries are 1500 milliamp hour, 2-cell lithium ion. They should be a decent match for this small brushless motor. Handling steering, we've got a 3 kilogram/centimeter servo, and the steering feels fairly sloppy, but it shouldn't be too bad for a car like this. Looks like these steering links are adjustable, and you can see we've got a little bit of metal in here, but this is a mostly plastic car. That includes some disappointing plastic in a few places of the drivetrain, which we'll take a look at in a minute. We can see we've got an all plastic chassis. There is a metal skid plate in the front. Arms appear to be the same front and rear and side to side, which is really nice because they'll be cheap to replace. We've got a bumper on the front with lights and no real bumper on the rear. You can see we've got a little bit more metal here for the hinge pin mounts. Let's go ahead and pull off these tires so we can get a closer look at those in the suspension. We've got some tools that come with the car. There's actually quite a bit that comes with the car. We've got some extra servo horns, some tools, some body clips, a wheelie bar, extra front and rear hubs. Hopefully this isn't because we're going to need them, and some extra wheel nuts, which we can see are not serrated. These wheels look pretty decent. I think they are foam filled. We do have metal hexes here, and as it turns out, the stock nuts are serrated, so you should hold on just fine. This suspension looks fairly typical. We've got metal stub axles. However, if you look in here, these are plastic drive axles with plastic output cups. I'm really curious to see how those are going to hold up to this little brushless motor. We're definitely going to find that out in a few minutes. Another thing I noticed is these are not oil-filled shocks. Let's pull one of these off, see if we can put oil in these. That makes a big difference in handling. As you can see, these are just Phillips head self-tappers. The way we can tell if these will be able to hold oil is if they have a seal in the bottom. Pull this bottom cap off and take a look inside. Unfortunately, no, these do not appear to have seals in them, so we cannot put oil in these. Interestingly, these do actually appear to be real friction shocks. The piece of plastic on the inside here is tapered, so depending on how far you tighten this, it does increase the friction on it. So this does have a little bit of tunability, though it would be nice to see oil-filled shocks. I'm sure you can upgrade them though. Now that I've seen these plastic axle shafts, I'm really curious to see what kind of gears this has in it. Let's pull it apart and find out. Before you start disassembling your truck, it's always a great idea to check the manual. This manual has some exploded views in it that'll help you determine how to take it apart, as well as give you spare part numbers. Along with that manual, you also get a little USB charger. I really don't recommend people use these chargers. They're okay to get started, but they really don't give you good information on what's going on with your batteries, and that's important to know that information to stay safe with lithium batteries. Now I'm taking this apart. If you enjoy full teardowns of the latest new vehicles, make sure you get subscribed. We've got some awesome new stuff coming, including the new Typhon Grom, which I'm going to be putting a full brushless system in and seeing just how fast we can make that little buggy go. Time to switch to power tools. That gives us a bit of a closer look at these axle shafts. They do feel pretty beefy for the size of the car, and there are a lot of trucks out there with plastic shafts that do just fine. We're gonna have to find out whether or not this will be okay when we go bash this truck. Looking inside here, we can also see that it does have ball bearings, which is nice to see. Those 3 screws remove the entire motor and motor mount. We can see the motor mount appears to be cast zinc, and there is a metal pinion in there. Looks like we do not have a center differential or slipper clutch, but there are all metal gears in here, though the output cups for the center drive shaft are plastic. So this entire module does need to come off because there are 2 more screws hidden underneath. Would have been nice to have had all those screws on the top so you didn't have to take this module out, but it's only 4 more screws. And with that, we can take this apart. We can see we've got more ball bearings in here, and we do have a steel ring gear connected to a steel pinion gear. So all of these gears are metal, which is nice to see. Let's see what's inside here though. One thing I will say is the grease in this truck is pretty gross. It kind of seems like old wheel bearing grease from a pickup truck. I'm gonna go put some gloves on. Hosim does have a couple of very similar models to this that have steel drive shafts, so you could probably upgrade these if you wanted to down the road. And inside here we have a grease-filled differential with all metal gears, another nice touch. Overall, for the price, what you get seems pretty good so far. Of course, we'll have to see about these plastic axles, and taking everything apart wasn't too difficult, not too many screws, fairly easy to do. Let me get this back together and we'll go ahead and take a closer look at those electronics. This 45 amp 2-in-1 ESC is obviously not waterproof. It does seem pretty stout, and it does have quite a few outputs for lights and a 3-wire servo. I also noticed that these are Rubicon capacitors. Assuming those are genuine Rubicon, that's a good sign because it means that they put a little extra money into this to get good components in it. Unlike when I usually complain about these Dean's connectors, I think this connector is perfectly sufficient for this 45 amp ESC. This is a plastic geared servo, so it'll be interesting to see just how long that lasts. And controlling those electronics, we just have a pretty generic looking 2.4 gigahertz transmitter. Nothing fancy, should work fine. Speaking of control, I want to see if we can control this thing up to the claimed 37 miles an hour. Let's get this battery charged up. I'll see you outside. Box says this thing will do 60 kilometers an hour. That's 37 miles an hour. I'm skeptical. Let's find out. Okay, it doesn't like going straight. Full speed. That is definitely not 37 miles an hour. Full speed. All right, one more time. Bring it in. Okay, 27 miles an hour. That's not too bad. That's obviously not the 37 miles an hour they advertised, but that's kind of what I figured it would be. Let's see what this thing can do off-road. But before we take it out, let's get this wheelie bar installed. I don't expect this truck to be doing any massive wheelies based on what I felt out there, but this will act as a rear bumper and will help protect the rear of the body as well as the chassis. Hopefully that steering issue I was feeling out on the pavement isn't going to translate to hard steering and bashing. Having less control off-road usually isn't quite as big of a problem as it is when you're trying to do speed runs on-road. Speaking of off-road, let's go see what this thing can do. So I've got a couple packs through this little Hosim X16 now. What do I think about it? Well, I don't think it's a great car, but I really like it. Let me explain what I mean. First of all, it doesn't handle the best. This steering is kind of all over the place, but that means it's kind of fun to drive too. It's a bit of a challenge, and off-road you're slipping and sliding around all the time anyway, so it's not as noticeable as on-road. The battery's not super powerful and it doesn't last all that long, but you get two of them plus a charger. The motor's not super powerful, but being an outrunner, it tends to stay pretty cool, and I've got a few packs through it now, and it doesn't seem to be any worse for wear. I do expect this thing to wear out more quickly than an in-runner, just because crap can get in it more easily, but so far, it's been just fine. The tires aren't really awesome on any surface, but they're pretty decent on all surfaces. This all-plastic chassis isn't amazing, but it has held up amazingly well, as has this little skid plate in the front. These are just plastic drive shafts, but they've also held up well, and I expect most of the parts on this truck to hold up well over time, primarily because it's difficult to get this thing into any real trouble. It's not that powerful and it's not that fast, so unless you drive it into a concrete wall, it's probably going to be okay. This car is almost as large as the Omni Terminator, and it costs quite a bit less. With the coupon I've got down in the description, that's a non-affiliate link by the way, you can pick this thing up for 130 bucks, and for a 1/12 scale basher that you can go out and have a lot of fun with and not have to buy anything else to run, I think it's a reasonable deal. Obviously, Obviously, you have to make sure your expectations are set properly. You're not going to be putting this on a racetrack. It doesn't even have oiled fill shocks, but if you want to just go out and bomb around and have some fun, this thing's pretty cool. Obviously, this kind of thing's not going to be for everyone, but if it's for you, check out that link down in the description, get subscribed, then check out one of these.